SOLIDWORKS, as you all probably know, is more than just CAD. We have a complete tool set to design, simulate, publish, and manage all your data. We have tools for electrical engineering design as well, and we can even help you assess the electrical systems that you may have, as well as the environmental impact of your products. Now today we're going to be discussing technical communication using SOLIDWORKS Composer, specifically creating custom component libraries. But before we get there, let's discuss SOLIDWORKS Composer in general first. Now, I'd like to compare how manufacturing processes have changed over the last century. Almost 100 years ago, Henry Ford amazed the world when he revolutionized manufacturing. And in 1914, his team was able to produce a chassis every 73 minutes, compared to every 12 hours only a few years earlier. Today, Ford produces almost 6 million new cars every year, and with no days off, running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that's a new car every 5.2 seconds. So clearly, companies need to stay on top of technology to move forward. And this also applies to technical communication. So luckily, technical communication has changed too. Now, rather than reading all the text on the left, wouldn't you rather see how this component fits together in the Composer exploded view on the right? Less text also means less translation is needed if you're communicating with people who don't speak English, which is another benefit. Let's take a look at some other possibilities. So, old digital photographs are often difficult to understand, or they're blurry. They're hard to see, and since they're a photo, they have no connection to the design. So when design changes occur, the photographs are obsolete, but the Composer model on the right is always going to update. Now let's look at a typical company. The engineering team is working hard to design the product, but all the other company divisions need the engineering department to give them things like rendered models or illustrations or exploded views or bills of materials or a number of other things. So with Composer, each of these other departments can be self-sufficient and get what they need without slowing down the engineering team. So Composer is used to create everything that those other departments may ever need, including exploded views, vector graphics and raster graphics, high-resolution images, shaded illustrations, interactive bills of materials and online catalogs, silhouette, wireframe and flat renderings, as well as interactive storyboards, where you can simply use your touchscreen to click on an image and look at that particular area of the model. And of course, video animations, which are also used for doing assembly instructions in the shop. So pretty much anybody can create all of these different things. You don't need to rely on the engineering department. Now, in addition to 3D content, Composer is also great at creating very nice 2D content, such as the illustration and rendering that you see here. Now, when Composer opens a SOLIDWORKS model, it only takes a copy of the geometry. So, as a design engineer, you don't need to worry about somebody else modifying your model. Also, since it only takes a copy of the geometry, not all the features and history that built the model, Composer files are very lightweight. You can very quickly open extremely large data sets in Composer and start using them to get the output that you need. For example, this large assembly video that's been created. Now, 3D graphics and animations allow you to communicate more clearly. Your employees, your partners, your customers, they'll all be able to better understand what you're trying to tell them, and they'll retain it longer. And by using existing product design data, you'll be able to optimize the workflows, keep communications up to date as designs change, which they always do, and you'll also bring the products to market faster. And by using visual communications instead of text, you will be able to minimize language translation costs and better communicate with non-technical audiences, whether they're internal or external to your company. So now, with all of that said, what we're going to do is we're going to get to the demonstration, and what we're doing in this session is we're going to be taking a look at how to incorporate tools into your technical communication. In effect, how to create templates that you can use to add your products and your models to, and then show how those models all work. So I'm going to jump over to SOLIDWORKS here. Okay, so now we're in SOLIDWORKS, and you can see I've got some components here. I've got a filter and a reducer here, as well as a regulator over here. And what we need to do is we need to show how to tighten up the nuts where the flanges connect these components. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, as the engineer, I'm going to save this out as a 3D, as a SOLIDWORKS Composer model. And if you look up at the top of my screen here, you'll see I can choose my add-ins, and one of the add-ins is to add in my SOLIDWORKS Composer plugin. Okay, so I've already done that. I've already hit the check mark here, and so the next thing that I'm going to do is, if I look up at the top, you can see there's my Composer pop-down, and I'm going to simply export this out. Now, there's two ways that you can get your models from SOLIDWORKS into Composer. You can either push them from SOLIDWORKS into Composer, or you can pull them. So if you open up Composer, you can actually open a SOLIDWORKS model, which will translate it into Composer for you there. So either way. I'm going to export this to Composer, and I'm going to save this. You can see that I'm going to save it as an SMG file, which is the file format that Composer reads. And I'll just hit save, and that's it. So now I have saved this out. I've translated it into a Composer model. So let's go into Composer now and open that up. And I'm going to do this the wrong way at first to show you what not to do. So as you can see, there's my SMG file that I just created. If I double click on that, I can open this up inside of Composer. Now, at first this looks good. You can see here's my graphics area with all my components in there. Here's the bolts and the nuts that I need to put into my documentation. Over here on the left, you'll see there's all of my components inside of my assembly. It all looks good, but the caveat here is you have to remember that, look at the top of this. Okay, this is showing me that this is the top level of this particular SMG. Now, if all I was doing was, adding a few actors here, such as arrows, or if I was exploding this, that would be fine. But what I want to do is I want to add additional components into this. I want to put a wrench in here. And the wrench isn't part of my SOLIDWORKS assembly. I want to add that here. So I just want to be very, very clear that opening up a model inside of Composer is fine, but if you intend to add additional components, it's not the right way to do it. And let me show you why. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go and add a wrench right now. So I'm going to say open, and I'm going to go find a wrench here, You can see I've got a wrench SMG right here. Now, when I click open, I get some additional options that I don't get if I just double click. Over here, I have the choice of how to open up this model. So if I simply click open, it will open it in its own window. So I'll actually have two windows open now. Or I can say merge into the current document. So it will put the wrench into my current piping assembly document. Or I could say merge into a brand new document. So I'm going to say merge into the current document, and I'm going to click open. So now I've got my wrench in place here. Okay, there it is. Now, at this point, I could go and position it and get it, situated right on top of the nuts that I want to show how they actually are going to be tightened. But keep in mind, and I did this wrong on purpose because I wanted you to see something. Notice that this wrench here is actually a sub-component underneath this piping assembly. Now, the reason that this is not the right way to do things is because I have actually modified my SMG file. But let's say that now I go back to SOLIDWORKS, or the engineering team decides that they're going to make a change, which always happens. So let's jump back over to SOLIDWORKS. So we're switching to SOLIDWORKS. There we go. And let's say that we're going to make a change. Okay, I'll just make a simple change here. We'll offset this this regulator here. Instead of 5 inches, let's make this say 15 inches. Okay, so that's a very obvious change that I just made. So I'll go ahead and save this. I'll resave out the Composer SMG file. Say yes to override it. And now when we come back over here to Composer, all I need to do is simply update this. And it will look and see if there's anything that has changed. So I'm going to say update the Composer document. We'll choose the new SMG, which I'm updating it with, and watch what happens. The wrench is gone, right? The reason is because I put the wrench into the piping assembly SMG file. And because that wrench is not in SOLIDWORKS, it's comparing and saying, what's the difference between these two models? There's no wrench in SOLIDWORKS, therefore I will remove it from the SMG file. Okay? So this is not the way that you want to do things if you're planning to add components to your SMG file. Let's take a look at the right way to do it. So what I want to do here is I'm going to say open. I've got a few options I can do. The first thing is I'm going to simply open up that SMG file, but instead of opening it, which is equivalently the same as when I double click on it in Windows Explorer, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge this into a brand new document. Okay? Think of this almost like, if you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS, think of this as parts and assemblies in SOLIDWORKS. So if I open this up, if I open the model, it's like opening a part. If I say merge into new document, it's like saying take this part and insert it into a new assembly, in which case all of the other components that I later add will be at the same level as that initial part, and they'll all be subsets of that assembly. Okay, so the same thing applies here. I'm going to say merge into a new document, and watch what happens here. When I do that, you see that up at the top here it says root. Okay, see up here in the assembly tree? It says root. And then everything below that is going to be a subset of that, that overall assembly SMG. Okay? So now if I go and I say, let's also open up that wrench, and this time I'll merge into the current document. Okay, I want to bring this into the documents I already have open. Now look at what happens. Now I have my piping assembly and my next level down are at the same level. Now in this case, what I've done is all of my tools that I have, my wrench, my drill, my reciprocating saw, all the things that I might want to bring into my Composer models, I've actually purposely put them into a new document. So you see how it actually says root up here? That's so that if I make a mistake and if I create a new document with my wrench and then I want to add something to that, it's always going to be the next level down, so I always know that they're always going to be at the same level. You don't necessarily need to do that, but it's just kind of a a nice easy way to make sure that you've always got it right. Now at this point, of course, I can go and I can start moving my wrench around and kind of get it into the position that I want to put it in, and make sure that it's going to in essence be in the right position for my nut, and save everything. Maybe let's create some views. So I'll create a new view here. Maybe I'll get another image of it like this, and we'll bring the wrench over. So we'll go ahead and grab that wrench, and maybe we'll bring this over here somewhere and turn it and get it into position. I won't go through all that, but just to show you that this is how you would do it. So I've got my views created. I've got everything that I need. And now, of course, the engineering department is going to make a change. Let's come back to SOLIDWORKS for a third time here, and let's make another change. Let's make this, I don't know, maybe 10. Okay. Obviously the changes can be more substantial than this, but this is just for demonstration purposes, just to show how things update. Okay, so I've made my change, and again we'll save this and we'll export this back out to Composer. And now when I go back over to Composer, right, because this piping assembly is the thing that has changed, but that doesn't affect everything else that's at the same level. So now when I say let's go update everything, I'll tell it what to update here. Notice that it updated the assembly, but the wrench didn't change. Okay, it always puts the most recently changed item at the bottom of the list, so you can see now my piping assembly is actually below the wrench. And by the way, you can also rename this if you don't want it to be named root. If you've got a number of components in there, you can just simply rename this so it's a little bit more obvious what you're looking at. Okay, but the point is that now if we go back to our views, we can see that all of our views have updated with the new size that was determined by the SOLIDWORKS model. Okay. Now, I'd like to just talk about one more way to do this. What I did is I created an SMG file from SOLIDWORKS, and then I brought that into Composer, and I created the root, base of the assembly tree by merging it into a new document. If you want to, you can also create templates. And so rather than doing this each time that you need to create a new document, you can create a template and then always use that template when you're creating a new SMG file. So let's close this up, and I'll show you how to do that. So rather than saying open and then either opening up an SMG file or a SOLIDWORKS model, what I can do is right up at the top here, you'll see I can create a brand new project. Now when I create a brand new project, let's just go put this, say on my desktop, and I'll call this piping or something. So now what it's going to do is it's going to ask me, what models do you want to put in this? Now, I'll just wait for it. There we go. So instead of going and picking the models that I want to put in this, if I simply hit cancel, notice what happens over here in the assembly tree. I get a root automatically put in there. So now if I save this, okay, now this can act like a template. And anytime that I need to go and create a new product or create a new SMG file, I can simply open up this particular project file and then say, open up whatever I want to open up and merge into the current document. Okay? So the nice thing about this is that, you know, as you're creating new projects, everything is going to be consistent as opposed to remembering, you know, the proper steps to take. Now, since we are, let's just go back and take a look at that other model that we had open. Let's just open up this guy right here. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to just show you something else that you can do. So in addition to manually adding tools like I did with the wrench, or you could, you know, put in a screwdriver or whatever you need to demonstrate how to do the thing is that you're trying to demonstrate. Something else that you can do is we actually have an image library that's built into Composer. So if I go and take a look at my image library, there's actually a whole set of, you know, little bitmaps that are built in. So if I want to show, you know, that I need to hammer something, I can simply drag my little hammer out here. It is a 2D image. It's not a 3D image like you saw before with the wrench, but for many people this is, you know, exactly what they need. There's a few others here that you can see here. There's a screwdriver. You know, it shows screwing something or unscrewing something. There's push buttons. There's inspection buttons. There's, you know, temperature buttons. All kinds of different things that you can add into your project here. And there's also a folder here called Widget. And Widget is actually pretty neat because what it will do is you can automate you know, playing or going forward or backwards between multiple views that you may have created. So, for example, let me just go create a new view here, and then maybe I'll just turn this around and create another view here somewhere. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to animate and show from this view to this view. So if I come back over to here, I can simply, you know, drag my little, you know, next button out here, and all I have to do is tell it exactly what I want it to do. So I'll tell it to go to my next view, for example, which is view 4. So when I click on this now, it's going to go to the next view. Okay, so when I click this, there you go, next view. So these are a few little extra things that you can have in your library, you know, to be able to create the views and the different images that you need. Let's jump back over to our PowerPoint here. And just remember that when you're using tools, you know, and this doesn't just go for tools. You could also have mannequins where you want to display your models and show, you know, how a person standing next to them would operate it, or perhaps you've just got a hand to show reaching out for something. Whatever it is that you're adding to your SMG model, just make sure to remember what option is the right one for you. So you want to make sure that you know, if you're going to open it, that's going to be simply editing the existing SMG. Or you can merge into the current document, in which case you're adding to an existing document, and of course merging to new document will create a new root directory that you can create new assemblies from. And then the other option that I mentioned is that you can create a template. And by creating a template, you'll notice down here that it's just creating a root, and there's nothing else in there yet. It's just an empty SMG that's ready to accept other models.